I am 28 years old, and for the past 2 years, I have been engaged to a wonderful man named Liam. He is kind, he is funny, and he treats me with a respect I never thought I would find. His family, however, was a different story. They were wealthy, from old money that trickled down through generations of smart investments and a successful family business. I came from a middle-class background, with parents who worked hard for everything they had. To Liam, this difference meant nothing. To his older sister, Chloe, it meant everything. From the moment Liam introduced me, Chloe treated me like something she had scraped off the bottom of her expensive shoe. Her compliments were always backhanded. If I wore a nice dress, she would say, "Oh, how lovely. It almost looks like designer." If I talked about my job as a project manager, she would smile tightly and say, "It's so important to have a little hobby to keep you busy." Every interaction was a subtle reminder that she believed I did not belong. I tried my best to ignore it. I loved Liam, and I wanted to be a part of his family. I smiled, I was polite, and I never let her see how much her words stung. The breaking point, the moment that changed everything, came during the planning of our wedding. We were having dinner at his parents' house, a weekly tradition. Liam and I had just announced that we had booked our dream wedding venue, a beautiful old estate with sprawling gardens. I was ecstatic. I had spent weeks researching it, and it was perfect. Chloe set her wine glass down with a delicate click. "The Ashton estate? Really?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "It's a bit quaint, isn't it? For a family like ours." I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. "We love it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's exactly what we wanted." "Of course," she said, turning to her mother. "It's just that people will expect a certain standard. We have a reputation to uphold. You're not just getting married, Liam. You're merging a name." Liam squeezed my hand under the table. "Chloe, we've already decided. Clara and I both love the place." Chloe waved a dismissive hand. "Fine, fine. It's your special day." She then looked directly at me, her eyes cold and hard. "Besides," she said, her voice dropping just enough so only I could hear it clearly, "you're not family yet." Those 5 words hit me harder than any of her previous insults. It was the finality in her tone, the clear line she had drawn in the sand. I was an outsider, a temporary guest who had not yet earned the right to have an opinion or a place. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The desire to keep the peace withered and died, replaced by a cold, quiet resolve. She had made it clear that she would never accept me. So I decided I would stop trying to be accepted. Instead, I would protect myself. The next day, I called Liam. I told him I had been thinking about our future. I told him that given his family's wealth and the business, it was probably a good idea to get a prenuptial agreement. He was surprised at first. He had always insisted that his money was our money, but I explained that it was not about trust. It was about clarity. It was about making sure everything was fair and transparent for everyone involved, especially his family. He was hesitant, but he understood my reasoning. He said if it made me feel more secure, then we would do it. He thought I was doing it to protect myself from his family's judgment. He was right, but not in the way he imagined. I was not building a shield. I was forging a weapon. The first step was finding a lawyer. I did not want to use the family's lawyer, the one who had handled their affairs for decades. I needed someone who worked for me and only me. I found a woman named Sarah who specialized in family law and had a reputation for being incredibly sharp. During our first meeting, I explained the situation. I told her about Chloe, about the constant undermining, and about the comment that had pushed me over the edge. Sarah listened patiently, taking notes. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair. "So, you're not just looking for a standard prenup to define separate and marital assets?" she said. "You're looking for something that addresses familial interference." I nodded. "Exactly. Is that even possible?" "It's unusual," she admitted, "but not impossible. We can draft clauses that set clear boundaries. For example, we can stipulate that any major financial decisions regarding shared assets must be approved in writing by both you and Liam. We can even add clauses that outline consequences for deliberate sabotage from a third party. A slow smile spread across my face. Tell me more about these consequences. The wedding planning continued, and with it, Chloe's meddling. She would call vendors behind my back, trying to change our orders to something more appropriate for their family's status. She questioned every choice I made, from the flowers to the invitations. Each time I would calmly tell her, Liam and I have already made our decision. Each time she would reply with a condescending smile as if I were a child playing dress up. I kept a detailed record of every incident, every phone call, every email, every backhanded comment. I forwarded the emails to Sarah. I wrote down the dates and times of the phone calls. I was building a case, piece by piece. Liam was getting more and more frustrated with his sister. He had several arguments with her, telling her to back off. She would always play the victim, claiming she was only trying to help and that I was being overly sensitive. She was an expert at twisting the situation, making it seem like I was the one creating drama. One afternoon, I was at a cafe when my phone rang. It was the caterer for our wedding. "Hi, Clara," he said, his voice hesitant. "I'm calling to confirm the changes to your menu. Your sister-in-law, Chloe, called this morning and approved the upgrade to the premium seafood package and the champagne fountain." My blood ran cold. "I'm sorry, what? I never approved any changes." "Oh," the caterer said, sounding confused. "She said you and Liam had discussed it and that she was calling to finalize the details. The additional cost is significant, so I wanted to double-check." "Thank you for calling me," I said, my voice tight. "Please do not make any changes to our original order. Any and all modifications must come directly from me or Liam in writing." After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, my coffee growing cold. This was more than just meddling. This was financial manipulation. She was trying to run up our wedding bill, knowing that Liam would eventually just pay it to avoid a fight. She was actively trying to cause financial stress between us before we were even married. I immediately called Sarah and told her what had happened. "This is exactly what we needed," Sarah said, her voice calm and professional. "This is a clear-cut case of interference. We're going to draft a clause that is so specific, so ironclad, that she won't be able to wiggle out of it." Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I worked on the prenup. We crafted a document that was fair and balanced, protecting both my assets and Liam's. But nestled deep within the legal jargon was what we called the Chloe Clause. It stated that any financial loss incurred by the couple due to the unsolicited and unapproved actions of a third-party family member would be reimbursed to the couple directly from that family member's personal assets or inheritance. It was a masterpiece. The day we were all scheduled to meet to sign the prenup arrived. We gathered in a large conference room at the office of Liam's family lawyer. Present were me, Liam, his parents, Chloe, my lawyer Sarah, and the family lawyer, a stern-looking man named Mr. Thompson. The atmosphere was tense. Liam's parents looked uncomfortable. Liam looked nervous. Chloe, however, looked smug. She was seated across the table from me, a triumphant little smile playing on her lips. She thought this was her victory. She thought the prenup was proof that I was nothing more than a transaction, a business deal that needed to be managed. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat and began to walk us through the document, explaining each section in dry legal terms. He went over the division of assets, the protection of the family business, and the terms of spousal support in the event of a divorce. I listened quietly, my hands clasped in my lap. Liam squeezed my knee under the table, a silent gesture of support. Finally, Mr. Thompson arrived at the section on familial interference. He paused, looking over his glasses at Sarah. "This is a rather unconventional addition," he said. Sarah smiled politely. My client felt it was necessary for her peace of mind. He began to read the clause aloud. As he spoke, I watched Chloe's face. At first, she looked bored. Then, as the words began to sink in, her expression shifted. The smug smile faltered. Her eyes narrowed. When he read the part about personal financial liability, her jaw went slack. The color drained from her face. She went pale, a stark, sickly white against her perfectly applied makeup. "What is this?" she stammered, looking from the lawyer to her father. "This is ridiculous. It's insulting." Liam's father looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Clara, what is the meaning of this clause?" I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment of truth. I looked directly at Chloe, my voice calm and steady. "It means that if someone were to, for example, call our caterer and try to add thousands of dollars to our bill without our permission, that person would be responsible for paying it herself." Chloe's eyes widened in shock. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I continued, my gaze never leaving hers. "Or, if someone were to cancel a vendor we had chosen and replace them with a more expensive one, creating a breach of contract fee, that person would be responsible for that fee." I pulled a folder from my bag and slid it across the table to Liam's father. "I've documented several such incidents over the past few months. The most recent one was just last week." Liam's father opened the folder. Inside were copies of emails, notes from phone calls, and a formal letter from the caterer detailing Chloe's unauthorized attempt to change our menu. He read through the documents, his face growing darker with each page. The silence in the room was deafening. Chloe looked like a cornered animal, her eyes darting between her father, her mother, and Liam. "Chloe?" her father said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Is this true?" "She's lying," Chloe shrieked, finding her voice at last. "She's twisting things. I was just trying to help. She's trying to turn you all against me." "The caterer is not lying," I said softly. "Neither is the florist whose order you tried to change, or the band you tried to cancel. I have spoken to all of them." Liam, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "I don't understand, Chloe. Why would you do this?" He looked genuinely hurt, his voice filled with a confusion that was almost painful to witness. He had always tried to see the best in his sister, to make excuses for her behavior. But now, faced with cold, hard proof, there were no excuses left. Chloe's composure finally shattered. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her mascara. "Because she's not one of us," she sobbed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She doesn't belong here. She's just after your money. I was trying to protect you, Liam. I was trying to protect our family." "Protect us?" her father thundered, slamming his hand on the table. "By committing financial fraud in our name? By exposing this family to potential lawsuits from vendors? You have embarrassed us, Chloe. You have embarrassed yourself." He looked at me, then at Liam. "The clause stays," he said, his voice firm. "In fact, I think it's an excellent idea. It seems we need to protect ourselves not from outsiders, but from our own." He then turned his steely gaze back to his daughter. "And as for you, Chloe, you will have no further involvement in this wedding. None. Is that understood?" Chloe just sat there, sobbing, her face a mess of tears and makeup. Her mother, who had been silent the entire time, finally went to her side, but she offered no words of comfort. There were none to give. Liam's lawyer, Mr. Thompson, cleared his throat again, looking flustered. "Well then," he said, "shall we proceed with the signing?" Liam picked up the pen. He looked at me, his eyes full of a mixture of apology, admiration, and love. He signed his name with a firm, steady hand. Then he passed the pen to me. I signed my name, my own hand not trembling in the slightest. As I wrote the final letter of my name, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I had not married into the family yet. But I had made it clear that I was not going anywhere, and I would not be underestimated. The wedding planning after that day was a dream. Chloe was nowhere to be seen. She had apparently gone on an extended vacation to find herself. Liam's parents, particularly his father, treated me with a newfound respect. They saw that I was not a threat, but an asset. I was not someone who could be pushed around. Our wedding day was beautiful. It was everything Liam and I had wanted it to be. It was held at the quaint, charming estate with the sprawling gardens. As I stood there saying my vows to the man I loved, I knew that I had made the right choice. I had fought for my place, and I had won. I was no longer an outsider waiting for permission to join. I was family, and I had the paperwork to prove it. The aftermath of that meeting was profound and lasting. It was not just about a single clause in a legal document, it was about a fundamental shift in the family dynamic. Chloe's influence, which she had wielded for years through manipulation and a carefully constructed image of being the family's protector, crumbled in a single afternoon. Her father, a man who valued integrity and business sense above all else, was deeply shaken by her deceit. It was not just the meddling in the wedding that angered him. It was the realization that his own daughter had been acting dishonestly, using the family name and funds for her own petty power plays. The promised audit of past family events that Chloe had managed went forward. The findings were quiet but damning. There was a clear pattern of her choosing vendors who were friends or who offered her kickbacks, always at an inflated cost to the family. It was a slow, steady drain, masked as high-end taste and a commitment to quality. Her father handled the situation internally. There were no grand pronouncements, but the consequences were severe. Chloe's access to the family's main accounts was revoked. Her personal trust fund was frozen, with a portion of it being used to reimburse the family for the overages she had created over the years. She was, in effect, put on a strict allowance, a humiliating blow for a woman who prided herself on her independence and lavish lifestyle. Her social standing within the family also took a massive hit. Relatives who had once admired her for her take-charge attitude now saw her as deceitful and petty. The story of the prenup meeting spread through the family grapevine, and the consensus was clear. Chloe had overplayed her hand and had been rightfully put in her place. She was no longer the trusted daughter and arbiter of family taste. She was a cautionary tale. Liam and I moved forward, our bond stronger than ever. The incident had forced him to see his sister for who she truly was, not who he wished she was. It was a painful realization for him, and we had many long talks about it. He felt guilty for not seeing it sooner, for not protecting me from her attacks. "I'm so sorry, Clara," he told me one evening as we sat on the couch in our new home. I kept telling myself she was just being overprotective. I never imagined she was capable of being so cruel. "You don't have to apologize," I said, taking his hand. "You see it now. That's what matters. We're a team, and we handle things as a team." He pulled me closer, and I rested my head on his shoulder. "You handled it," he said quietly. "I was just standing there. You were incredible. You were so strong and calm. I've never been more proud of you." His words meant more to me than he could ever know. It was not about being praised for my strength. It was about being seen, truly seen by the man I loved. He understood that my actions had not come from a place of malice, but from a need to protect our future together. His mother, who had been a silent enabler of Chloe's behavior for years, also had a change of heart. A few weeks after the signing, she invited me to lunch, just the two of us. I was hesitant, but I agreed. We met at a quiet restaurant, and for the first few minutes, we made polite small talk. Then she put down her fork and looked at me, her eyes filled with a genuine remorse. "I owe you an apology, Clara," she said. "I stood by and let Chloe treat you poorly. I told myself it was just sibling rivalry, that she would come around eventually. I was wrong. I should have stepped in a long time ago. I am truly sorry." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. It could not erase the hurt of the past, but it was a bridge. It was an acknowledgement of the truth. "I appreciate you saying that. I hope that we can start over," she said. "I would very much like for us to have a good relationship. You are my son's wife, and you are a part of this family now." From that day on, our relationship changed. She began to call me just to chat. She asked for my opinion on things. She treated me not as an outsider, but as a daughter. It was a slow process, but it was real. Chloe eventually returned from her vacation, a much more subdued version of her former self. She was still polite and poised on the surface, but the arrogance was gone, replaced by a brittle wariness. She avoided being alone with me. At family gatherings, she would keep her distance, her eyes never quite meeting mine. The power dynamic between us had been irrevocably altered. She no longer held any power over me, and we both knew it. The prenup, the very document she had championed as a way to put me in my place, became a symbol of her downfall. It sat in a safe deposit box, a silent testament to the day she had underestimated me. The Chloe clause, as Sarah and I still privately called it, was never needed again. Its mere existence was enough to ensure that the boundaries were respected. Years have passed since then. Liam and I are happily married with 2 beautiful children. He has taken on a larger role in the family business, working alongside his father. I continued my own career, and we have built a life together based on mutual respect, trust, and a true partnership. Chloe is still a part of our lives, in the way that family is always a part of your life. But she is a shadow of her former self. Her attempts to regain her former status in the family have been unsuccessful. Her parents keep her on a tight leash, and the rest of the family treats her with a polite but distant caution. She never remarried after her first divorce, her fear of being taken advantage of seemingly eclipsing any chance at a real connection. Sometimes, when I look at her across the dinner table at a holiday gathering, I see a flicker of the old resentment in her eyes. But it is a fire that has long since lost its heat. It is nothing more than glowing embers, a reminder of a battle she lost long ago. The irony is that in her desperate attempt to keep me out, to prove that I was not family, she ended up isolating herself. She drew a line in the sand, and when the dust settled, she was the one left on the outside. I never set out to humiliate her or to cause a rift in the family. I only wanted to protect my future, my happiness, and my love for Liam. But in defending my own boundaries, I had inadvertently exposed the truth that had been hiding in plain sight for years. Sometimes, standing up for yourself does more than just protect you. It changes the entire landscape. It forces everyone around you to reevaluate their positions, to confront uncomfortable truths, and to ultimately decide what kind of family they want to be. In our case, it made us stronger, more honest, and more united. And it all started with 5 little words, and a promise I made to myself to never let anyone make me feel small again. The initial period after the prenup signing was a delicate dance of readjustment for everyone. Liam's father, a man of few words but decisive action, took the lead. He scheduled a series of meetings with his wife, Liam, and a family counselor. I was invited to join, but I politely declined. I told Liam that this was something they needed to work through as a family of origin. My role was to be his partner, not to mediate his family's long-standing issues. This decision, I later learned, earned me even more respect from my father-in-law. He saw it as a sign of maturity and an understanding of boundaries, the very thing Chloe lacked. From what Liam told me, the sessions were tense and emotional. His mother had to confront the ways in which she had enabled Chloe's behavior by always smoothing things over, by always prioritizing the absence of conflict over the presence of justice. She had a deep-seated fear of confrontation, which Chloe had exploited for years. Liam had to unpack his own tendency to make excuses for his sister, born out of a childhood where he was taught to be the peacemaker. It was a difficult process, but a necessary one. They began to learn how to communicate more directly and to hold each other accountable. Meanwhile, I focused on building our new life. Liam and I moved into a house that we chose together in a neighborhood that felt like us, not like a statement of wealth. We decorated it with furniture we both loved, a mix of modern and classic pieces that represented our 2 worlds coming together. It was our sanctuary, a place where the drama of his family could not touch us. One of the first tests of the new dynamic came a few months after the wedding, when it was time to plan for the holidays. Traditionally, Chloe had been in charge of hosting the big Christmas Eve dinner. It was her show, her chance to display her impeccable taste and to be the center of the family's social world. This year, however, Liam's mother called me. "Clara, dear," she said, her voice warm. "I was hoping you and Liam might consider hosting Christmas Eve this year." I think it would be a lovely change. I was taken aback. Are you sure? I know that's usually Chloe's thing. I think it's time for some new traditions, she replied firmly. And frankly, I think your father-in-law would be much more relaxed at your house. I talked it over with Liam, and we agreed. We hosted a simple but elegant dinner. The atmosphere was completely different from previous years. It was relaxed, filled with laughter and genuine warmth. Chloe attended, of course. She brought a ridiculously expensive bottle of wine and a hostess gift that was clearly meant to outshine any other. But her efforts fell flat. No one commented on the price of the wine. They were too busy enjoying the food, the company, and the feeling of being in a home where they could simply be themselves. Chloe spent most of the evening sitting quietly, a forced smile on her face. I saw her watching me as I moved around the room, talking to guests, refilling glasses, making sure everyone was comfortable. I was not trying to be the perfect hostess. I was just being myself. And in that moment, I think she finally understood what she had gotten so wrong. Being a part of a family is not about control or performance. It is about connection. It is about creating a space where people feel welcome and loved. It was a role I had stepped into effortlessly, not because I was trying to take her place, but because it was who I was. As the years went on, the Chloe Claus became something of a family legend, a story told with a mixture of humor and awe by the younger cousins. It served as a permanent reminder that in our family, respect and integrity were not optional. You could not bully your way to the top. Chloe never truly recovered her former position. She found a job working in an art gallery, a position her father helped her get. It gave her a sense of purpose, but it was a far cry from the power she had once wielded as the unofficial matriarch of the younger generation. We maintained a cordial but distant relationship. We were civil at family functions, we exchanged pleasantries, but there was a wall between us that would never come down. I did not hate her. In a strange way, I almost pitied her. She was so trapped in her own insecurities, so defined by her family's name and wealth, that she had no idea who she was without them. My relationship with my in-laws, on the other hand, blossomed. My father-in-law, in particular, became one of my biggest supporters. He admired my business sense and my no-nonsense approach to problems. We would often talk about the market, about new investment opportunities, and about the future of the family business. He saw me as a peer, as an equal. He valued my perspective, something Chloe had always craved but never truly earned. One day, he called me into his study. Liam was there too. He told us that he was thinking about stepping back, about retiring in the next few years. He wanted Liam to take over as CEO. And then he looked at me. "Clara," he said, "I would like you to consider taking a position on the board of directors. Your insights would be invaluable." I was stunned. A position on the board was a place of immense trust and responsibility. It was a clear signal to the entire family and the business world that I was not just Liam's wife. I was a key player in the family's future. "I would be honored," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Liam beamed, wrapping his arm around me. "I told you he was a fan," he whispered in my ear. When the news was announced to the rest of the family, Chloe's reaction was predictable. She was furious. She called Liam, accusing me of manipulating her father, of staging a coup. But this time, Liam did not try to placate her. "She earned it, Chloe," he said, his voice firm. "She's smart, she's capable, and Dad trusts her. This has nothing to do with you. Maybe it's time you started being happy for other people's success instead of seeing it as a threat to your own." That conversation was another turning point. It was the moment Liam fully stepped out of the role of peacemaker and into the role of my husband and partner, defending our team without hesitation. Chloe had no response. She hung up on him, and they did not speak for several weeks. Life continued to move forward. Our children grew, and our home was filled with the chaotic joy that only little ones can bring. My in-laws were doting grandparents, and they treated my own parents with the utmost respect and warmth. Our two families, once separated by a chasm of wealth and class, had blended together beautifully. I often think back to that day in the lawyer's office, to the moment Chloe's face went pale. It was not a moment of triumph for me, not in the way she would have understood it. It was not about winning a fight. It was about ending one. It was about declaring, in the clearest possible terms, that I would not participate in her games. I would not be bullied. I would not be undermined. And I would not allow her toxicity to poison the life I was building with the man I loved. The prenup was my declaration of independence. It was the tool that allowed me to carve out a space for myself in a family that was not ready to welcome me. And in doing so, it forced that family to become better, to become healthier. Chloe's cruelty was a symptom of a deeper dysfunction, and by refusing to tolerate it, I had inadvertently forced a cure. I never needed the money. I never cared about the status. All I ever wanted was a partner, a family, and a place to belong. And in the end, I got all of it. Not by playing by Chloe's rules, but by writing my own. The most important clause in our life together was never written on paper. It was the unspoken agreement between me and Liam to always have each other's backs, to be a team, to be a family of our own, first and foremost. And that was a contract that no one could ever break. The story could end there, with a neat and tidy resolution. But the ripples of that confrontation continued to spread in subtle ways for years. One of the most significant changes was in the family's approach to newcomers. When my brother-in-law, Liam's younger brother, started dating a woman named Emily, the family's reaction was a case study in lessons learned. Emily, like me, came from a more modest background. The old Chloe would have seen her as another threat, another social climber to be vetted and dismissed. But the new Chloe was different. At the first family dinner where Emily was introduced, I watched my sister-in-law closely. She was quiet, observant. She asked Emily polite questions about her work and her interests. There was no condescension, no backhanded compliments. It was a stilted, awkward interaction, but it was civil. It was progress. Later in the evening, I found myself in the kitchen with Liam's mother. "Chloe is being surprisingly pleasant," I commented. She sighed, a sad, knowing sound. "She sees what she lost," she said. "She sees you and Liam so happy. She sees the respect your father-in-law has for you. She knows she played the game wrong. I don't think she's a changed person, not deep down. But she's learned that her old tactics don't work anymore. Fear is a powerful motivator." It was a sobering thought. Chloe's change in behavior was not born of remorse, but of consequence. She was not a better person. She was just a more careful one. It made me realize that some victories are not about changing hearts and minds. Sometimes they are simply about establishing a new set of rules that everyone must play by, whether they like it or not. As my role on the board of the family company solidified, I found myself in a position to make real, substantive changes. The company had a long-standing philanthropic arm, but it was mostly focused on large, impersonal donations to established institutions. The opera, the art museum, the kinds of charities that looked good on a gala invitation. I pushed for a new direction. I argued that we should invest in grassroots community programs, in education initiatives for underprivileged children, in scholarships for first-generation college students. My father-in-law was receptive. He had a good heart, but he was insulated by his wealth. He had never really considered the impact their money could have on a more personal, local level. I spearheaded a new foundation, and it became my passion project. We partnered with local schools and community centers, and I made sure to be personally involved. I visited the programs, I met the people we were helping, and I brought those stories back to the board. It was some of the most fulfilling work I had ever done. And it had an unexpected side effect. It changed the public perception of the family. They were no longer just the wealthy, distant owners of a large corporation. They were seen as active, engaged members of the community. It was a legacy that I was proud to be building. A legacy that was about more than just money. Chloe, predictably, was dismissive of my work with the foundation. "It's all very noble, I'm sure," she said to me once at a family gathering. "But is it really the best use of our resources? Think of the return on investment." I just smiled. "Some returns can't be measured in dollars, Chloe." Her comment revealed that she still did not understand. She saw everything through the lens of profit and loss, of social climbing and strategic advantage. She could not comprehend that someone might do something simply because it was the right thing to do. That, more than anything, was the real tragedy of her character. Liam and I made a conscious effort to raise our children with a different set of values. We lived comfortably, but we did not spoil them. They had chores, they had allowances, and they were taught the value of $1. We volunteered together at the local food bank. We wanted them to understand that they were privileged, and that privilege came with a responsibility to be kind, to be compassionate, and to look out for those with less. We were determined that the entitlement that had so warped Chloe's personality would not take root in our children. One summer afternoon, when our son was about 10 years old, he came home from a friend's house looking troubled. I asked him what was wrong. "My friend said that we're rich," he said, the word sounding strange in his mouth. "Are we, Mom?" I sat down with him and had a long talk. "Yes," I said. "We have more money than a lot of people. That's true. But that doesn't make us better than anyone else. It just means we have a bigger responsibility to be good people. Money is a tool. You can use it to build things up, or you can use it to tear things down. Dad and I are trying to use it to build things up, and we hope that one day you will too." He seemed to understand. He nodded, and then he went outside to play. The weight lifted from his shoulders. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of peace. I knew that we were breaking the cycle. The legacy of our family would not be one of class and division, but one of kindness and contribution. As the years passed, my father-in-law's health began to decline. He retired, and Liam stepped seamlessly into the role of CEO. I remained on the board, a trusted advisor and a steadying presence. During his final years, my father-in-law and I became very close. He would often ask me to sit with him in his study, and we would talk for hours, not just about business, but about life, about family, about the things that truly matter. One day, he took my hand. His grip was frail, but his eyes were clear. "Thank you, Clara," he said, his voice raspy. "You were the best thing that ever happened to this family. You woke us up." Tears welled in my eyes. "You've all been very good to me," I said. "We learned to be," he replied with a weak smile. "You taught us." He passed away a few months later, peacefully, surrounded by his family. His death was a great loss, but it also brought the family closer together. Even Chloe seemed to soften in her grief. At the funeral, she approached me, her face pale and drawn. "He really loved you, you know," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I know," I said. "I loved him too." It was not an apology. Not really. But it was an acknowledgement. It was a moment of shared grief. A recognition that we were, for better or for worse, bound together by the complicated ties of family. After his death, the will was read. He left the business to Liam, as expected. He provided generously for his wife and for all of his children and grandchildren. And then there was a personal bequest. He left me his personal library, a collection of rare books that had been his greatest passion. And with it, a handwritten note. It read, "To Clara, who always knew the value of things that cannot be bought. May you continue to fill our family's story with wisdom and grace." I held the note in my hand, the ink slightly blurred, and I wept. I wept for the man I had come to love as a father. I wept for the long, hard journey it had taken to get to this place of acceptance and love. And I wept with a quiet, profound gratitude for the life I had built, a life that was so much richer and more beautiful than I could ever have imagined. The prenup still sits in that safe deposit box. We have long since forgotten about it. We do not need it anymore. The boundaries it established have become a natural part of our family's landscape. The lessons it taught have been absorbed into our collective consciousness. It is a relic of a time that feels like another lifetime. A reminder of a battle that, once won, never had to be fought again. My story is not one of revenge, not really. It is a story about boundaries. It is about the quiet strength it takes to stand up for yourself in the face of disrespect. It is about refusing to shrink yourself to fit into a space that was not made for you, and instead, having the courage to reshape that space until it is a place where you can not only fit, but flourish. Chloe thought she was guarding the gates of the family, but what she failed to realize was that a family is not a fortress to be defended. It is a garden, and with the right care, it has an infinite capacity to grow. The years that followed my father-in-law's passing were a period of quiet consolidation for our family. Liam led the company with a steady hand, blending his father's traditional wisdom with his own modern, more compassionate approach. The company thrived, not just financially, but in its culture. It became known as a place where employees were valued, a reputation that Liam worked hard to cultivate. My work with the foundation also grew. We expanded our reach, establishing new partnerships and launching several successful initiatives. I found a deep and abiding passion for this work, and it became the central focus of my professional life. I was no longer just Liam's wife. I had my own identity, my own sphere of influence, and my own sense of purpose. Chloe, in a surprising turn of events, began to pour her considerable energy into her job at the art gallery. Freed from the self-imposed pressure of being the family's social director, she discovered that she actually had a talent for curating. She had a keen eye and a sharp business sense, and she quickly rose through the ranks. She became the gallery's director, and under her leadership, it became one of the most respected contemporary art spaces in the city. For the first time in her life, she had a success that was entirely her own, something that had nothing to do with her family's name or money. It changed her. The brittle, defensive edge she had carried for so long began to soften. She was still reserved, still guarded, but there was a new confidence in her, a quiet self-assurance that had not been there before. Our relationship evolved into something I never would have expected. We were not close friends, and we never would be. The scars of the past were too deep for that. But we found a way to coexist, to be family in a way that was functional and, at times, even pleasant. We could have a conversation at a family dinner without the undercurrent of tension that had once defined our interactions. We could talk about her work at the gallery, or my work with the foundation, with a measure of mutual, if distant, respect. One day, she called me out of the blue. "The gallery is hosting a charity auction next month," she said, her voice businesslike. "We're raising money for a new arts education program for inner-city schools. I was wondering if your foundation would consider being a sponsor." I was momentarily speechless. It was the first time she had ever asked me for anything, the first time she had acknowledged my work as something valuable. "Of course, Chloe," I said, recovering my composure. "Send me the proposal. I'll present it to the board." The foundation did sponsor the event, and it was a huge success. I attended the auction, and I watched Chloe as she commanded the room, speaking with passion and intelligence about the importance of art. I saw a side of her I had never seen before. A woman who was talented, driven, and capable. I realized that for all those years, her bitterness and jealousy had been a cage of her own making. Her constant need to prove her superiority had masked a deep-seated fear that she was not good enough on her own. Now that she had found something that was truly hers, she was finally, slowly, beginning to set herself free. After the auction, she found me in the crowd. "Thank you, Clara," she said, "for your support. It meant a lot." "It was a wonderful event, Chloe," I replied. "You should be very proud." We stood there for a moment in an awkward but not unfriendly silence. It was a truce, a quiet acknowledgement of the long and difficult road we had traveled. We would never be sisters in the way that some are, but we were family. We were bound by a shared history, by the love we both had for Liam and his parents, and by the children who were our nephews and nieces. And perhaps, after all this time, that was enough. As my own children grew into teenagers, they began to ask more questions about the family, about our history. One evening, my daughter, who was a whip-smart and perceptive young woman, asked me a question that took me by surprise. "Mom," she said, "why is Aunt Chloe so sad?" I had never thought of Chloe as sad before. I had thought of her as angry, as bitter, as arrogant. But sad? My daughter, with the clear, uncomplicated vision of youth, had seen something I had missed. I thought for a moment before I answered. "I think," I said carefully, that for a long time your Aunt Chloe was afraid. She was afraid of not being important, of not being in control. And that fear made her build a lot of walls around herself. And sometimes when you live behind walls for too long, it gets very lonely. My daughter nodded, seeming to understand. That's why you're always telling us to be brave and kind, she said, so we don't have to build walls. Exactly, I said, my heart swelling with love for this incredible child. That's exactly right. In that moment, I felt a wave of gratitude so profound it almost brought me to tears. I was grateful for the struggles, for the battles, for the difficult lessons. Because they had not broken me. They had forged me. They had taught me the true meaning of strength, the importance of boundaries, and the quiet, unshakable power of integrity. The prenup, that infamous document, had been the catalyst for so much change. But it was never about the document itself. It was about what it represented. It was about my refusal to accept a role that was assigned to me. My refusal to be defined by someone else's prejudice. It was about claiming my own power, not to dominate or control, but to create a life of my own choosing. And now, looking at my daughter, I saw that the most important legacy I could leave was not money or a position on a board, but the simple, powerful lesson that she had just articulated. Be brave. Be kind. Do not build walls. It was the antithesis of everything Chloe had once stood for. It was the foundation upon which Liam and I had built our lives. And it was the legacy that would carry our family into the future. The final chapter of this long saga came in a way I never expected. My mother-in-law passed away several years after her husband. Her death was peaceful, and the family gathered once again to mourn and to celebrate her life. In the days following the funeral, Liam, Chloe, and their younger brother met to go through their parents' personal effects. I stayed home, giving them the space to have that experience together. Liam came home late that evening, looking emotionally exhausted. He was carrying a small, locked wooden box. "Mom left this for Chloe," he said, "but Chloe insisted that I give it to you. She said you would know what to do with it." I was confused. I took the box and looked at the small key that was tied to its handle. With a sense of trepidation, I opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a collection of old letters, tied together with a ribbon. And on top of the letters was a single, folded piece of paper. It was a letter from my mother-in-law, written in her elegant looping script. It was addressed to Chloe. "My dearest daughter," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone. There are so many things I wish I had said to you, so many things I wish I had done differently. I know that I failed you in many ways. I saw your unhappiness, your insecurity, and instead of helping you find your own strength, I enabled your worst instincts. I chose peace over truth, and in doing so, I allowed a bitterness to take root in your heart. For that, I am eternally sorry." The letter went on, a mother's heartbreaking confession of her own fears and failings. She wrote of how she had seen so much of her own youthful insecurities in Chloe, and how, instead of guiding her, she had allowed Chloe to make the same mistakes she had. The final paragraph was what made me catch my breath. "When Clara came into our lives," she wrote, "I was afraid. But she was not the threat I imagined. She was a gift. She was strong in a way that I never was, and she forced us all to be better. She did not tear our family apart, my dear Chloe. She put it back together. I know you have been angry for a long time, but I beg of you, let go of that anger. It is a poison that will only harm you. Learn from Clara. Learn from her grace, from her strength, from her capacity to build rather than to break. She has been a better daughter to me than I sometimes deserved, and a better sister to you than you ever allowed her to be. It is my final wish that you find peace, with her and with yourself." Tears streamed down my face as I read the words. I understood now why Chloe had wanted me to have this. It was her way of surrendering. It was her final, silent acknowledgement of the truth. It was an apology, not just for her own actions, but for the years of pain that had led to them. I put the letter back in the box and closed the lid. I did not need to keep it. The words were etched in my memory. The next time I saw Chloe, I would not mention the letter. I would not say a word. I would simply look at her, and I would let her see in my eyes that the war was finally, truly over. And in its place, there was a quiet, empty space. A space that was not yet filled with friendship or love, but was, for the first time, free of hatred. It was a space that held the possibility of something new. It was a space called peace.